Trump seems to be freaking out over the bombshell scandal that has really sent shockwaves through politics, our political discussion. And this relates to the Russian influence in the 2024 election. The Russian government, as it does, trying to impact our electoral process by weaving different ideas, by propping up different figures, and by promoting different divisive topics. And so that's going on. The DOJ is rolling out its response to this. Trump's very unhappy that the DOJ would dare to present facts to us about what's going on that front. And what I want to do is first look at Trump's reaction to this story, then get to some details about the different MAGA influencers who were getting money. We talked about this already a little bit, but I need to circle back to it because it's crazy. People we've been talking about so much, and I'll say something it seems off. Why is this so pro-Russian? And then you look at the money that was being funneled. But before getting to that, we already talked about this from Trump's Wisconsin speech. Then we'll look at his follow-up response.
Ago, it started again. The Justice Department said Russia may be involved in our elections again. You see that, Mr. Congressman? Great congressman from Texas. You see that? Russia. It's Russia. And you know, the whole world laughed at him this time.
All right, again, we looked at that already. Then you have this report from Mediaite. Trump loses it over new Russian interference stories. Putin would much rather see Comrade Kamala Harris win. Former president, Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump railed against the Department of Justice over its efforts to thwart Russian election interference schemes on Thursday, arguing that Russian dictator Vladimir Putin would rather see Vice President Kamala Harris defeat him in the upcoming presidential election. Then why are all these things being done to help you? Comrade Kamala Harris and her Department of Justice are trying to interfere in and suppress the election in favor of the Democrats by resurrecting the Russia hoax and trying to say that Russia's trying to help me, which is absolutely false. In fact, and this was of course something he wrote on Truth Social, being cited in this article, in fact, President Putin would much rather see Comrade Kamala Harris in office, as he strongly said just this morning. Even Trump at this speech acknowledged that was probably him being ironic. Why aren't they looking into Iran, China, and other countries? And more importantly, why aren't they looking at Mark Elias, Mark Pomerantz, the relationship between Lisa Monaco to Andrew Weissman, crew, and all of the other enemies of the people that had such an effect on the 2020 election and are trying to rig and steal the 2024 presidential election? So ironic watching Lisa Monaco. You get the point. A bunch of deranged stuff. And again, instead of us all patriotically saying, you know what, we don't want foreign countries involved in our political discourse. We don't want foreign governments trying to overtly, explicitly divide us to help their interests, pushing false, misleading ideas to rile people up, propping up certain figures in ways that violate laws surrounding foreign agents. And we could all say, regardless of who they're trying to help or not, we don't want that as a country. But instead, MAGA starts doing this weird defense of Russia. No, they're not involved. No, who cares? Don't worry about it. Or Trump here turning this back around to his lies about election interference. Well, what's one of the examples of how the Russian government has been trying to involve itself in this election cycle? Well, Forbes report to our Tim Pool and Benny Johnson what to know about the 6 right-wing commentators DOJ alleges were funded by Russia. We went over the details of this. Essentially, to break it down, you have a company I've been seeing everywhere, Tenet Media, and huge right-wing figures had gone into some business relationships with Tenet Media, deals of different sorts. You have Tim Pool, you have Benny Johnson, you have Dave Rubin, Lauren Sutherland, and others. And the Russian government was directing money through a bunch of different entities to abstract, make it hard to track where it was coming from, directly funding into the Tenet Media, and then Tenet Media was paying big bucks to these people. I said in my original segment about this, I don't necessarily think these American right-wing influencers who had careers before these deals necessarily knew about that connection, But now they should be asking themselves, why is it that millions of dollars will be invested by the Russian government into propping their messages up? Why is what they're saying so in line with this authoritarian government and so in line with their interest in dividing America? And they should have asked questions like, why is this company willing to pay me so much for so little? The host of the Rubin Report YouTube channel with 2.45 million subscribers as of Thursday, David Rubin, has been identified as the likely commentator one, who signed a deal with Tenet to produce 4 videos per week in exchange for $400,000 per month and a $100,000 signing bonus, but who also was unaware the money was coming from Russian sources, the indictment said. Again, it's perfectly reasonable to assume they didn't know that connection. You have to have quite an ego on you or to think you stumbled into the most lucky deal ever with his influence to think it makes sense for you to get paid $400,000 for 4 videos per week monthly. Because you can compare, viewership of different channels. And as someone in this space, I can tell you, despite what Tim Pool's going to say in a clip I have for you, that's not the market rate, okay? Shockingly, that's not the standard. And actually, let's go ahead and get to that. Here is Ron Filipkowski's cut of a few different moments from the Tim Pool response to this.
And we were preparing to engage in sponsorships, and they were getting hundreds of thousands of views per episode. And we decided to license it out because Lauren contacted us and was saying, we'd love to license something from you. And I said, well, we don't need to do that. We're an independent company. We have our own members and sponsorships. And then it took quite a while, but long story short, we agreed to a non-exclusive broadcast license, which meant that we own the show. So I barely even talked to Lauren. And it's kind of crazy. I've known her for a long time. So when she said that she was launching a company, she had investors, I'm like, okay. I mean, I hear that 50 times a year. And in the podcast space, we just heard that I think Travis Kelce is getting a $100 million contract. So these numbers that's where they're at. I think people don't realize how big the podcasting space is and the revenue that you generate from sponsorships and memberships. And for all I knew, this was, Lauren Chen. She works at The Blaze. She wanted to start a company. She found investors. That was seemingly the gist of it.
Okay. Oh, this is so funny. He's relying on his audience not really knowing any context of the podcasting space. It's true, people make some crazy money doing podcasting, but it's funny because we work in this space and we checked this morning. I don't know if other platforms are bigger for Tim Pool, but at least YouTube, which I know he does put a lot of emphasis on, we get like the same viewership that he does. And I can tell you, him citing a Travis Kelce $100 million deal, it's not a logical connection to what we're doing. And for him to then try to pass off, it made total sense that this company came to me and said, we want to pay you. At least in the article I read, it didn't cite Tim Pool's exact amount, but you got the Rubin example, and arguably Tim Pool has more viewership. And so it's probably something like that, just outrageous numbers for the content being demanded.
We ever took money from an American corporation. The amount of money that we were offered for the show was around market value for offers we had already received. And so it was just like, cool, I know Lauren, sure, whatever. And then you got Benny and Dave and Matt Christensen and Taylor Hansen, who I know them all. And I'm like, yeah, this seems fine, whatever. And the crazy thing is, assuming all this stuff is true, I'm like, man, this sucks. We didn't need the deal. The deal didn't do anything for us. It was just, sure, I guess. And the revenue that we were paid through the licensing deal was inconsequential to my lifestyle, to the bottom line of the company.
He must have a crazy business model if he's saying hundreds of thousands of dollars per month extra. That was a drop in the bucket. We barely even noticed it. Tenet Media, who? Yeah, right, Tim. Yeah, right. At least to be honest. Mueller, she wrote, responded to this. Tim Pool is claiming that $100,000 per podcast episode is the normal market value of a show that gets 100,000 to 200,000 views. I own a podcast network with shows that outperform his, and that's absolutely not true. Yeah, you could probably intuitively guess that is not true. So don't do that. You can say, yeah, we were getting paid a lot of money and we thought, hey, we make great content, pay us a lot of money. They don't have editorial control and we didn't know the money was coming from Russia. That's an argument, as vile as his political views have become, that people I think can accept, with the request attached to that acceptance that a little bit of introspection's done about why the Russian government wants to prop up voices like yours, why they want to funnel money to you to make it easier for your show to grow even further, why folks who do a show like mine aren't offered insane deals like that by foreign governments. What's the distinction in our dedication to the truth? Not to toot my own horn, but it doesn't seem like introspection is being done. And the other crazy thing, that every single one of these people that have responded, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool being the two that I've followed most closely, and Dave Rubin, I think, bolstered Tim Pool's message. They've been saying, we're the victims of this. We were duped. We've been wronged. We're the ones who have been damaged. Oh, stop it, Mr. $100,000 per podcast episode. Cut it out. Then, let's see here. There does seem to be some examples in the indictment of Benny Johnson, for example, based on what's being alleged, having the person at Tenet Media say, hey, would you cover this story about Russia or something? So them saying, we never did any stories that the Russian government wanted us to. There probably was. When you're on a network, my assumption we're on a network, but my assumption is occasionally the network says, hey, are you interested in covering this story? Assuming you're going to cover it the way that they like to, because that's already a part of why they approached you, is you're likely to have these sorts of views and be super dishonest. The majority of people who watch the show on a regular basis aren't actually subscribed to the channel. If you can make sure you are by clicking that subscribe button, easy, free, simple, but makes all the difference. I greatly appreciate it to help us get the word out. Back to the video. A little side thing. This is so... Actually, let's do the side thing later. And let me remind you of who Dave Rubin is. This is, as many people have described it, one of the rare, really solid Joe Rogan moments where just through simple questioning, he has MAGA Dave Rubin absolutely crumbling in his argument about regulations.
What problem would you... Everything you're building here right now, right? Do you want the government to tell you how to do all these things and all the regulations that you got to have your electric thing this far from this and like all
the regulations like that for construction are important though. You do have to make sure that people don't do stupid shit. But make sure you don't have a power line that's near a water line. There's a lot of.
But I would put most of that on the builders though. They want to build things that are good. Now I get it.
That's not true. Listen, people
people are going to build
corners all the time. Like you have to have regulations when it comes to construction methods, or people are going to get fucked.
They cut corners when there are regulations anyway.
They do. They would cut a lot more if there weren't regulations.
I'm not totally.
If you go to third world countries and look at construction methods, they're fucking dangerous.
Yeah.
That's why schools collapse on kids in foreign countries sometimes. Like.
Well, I'm not telling you that I'm against all regulation, period. That's where I said intellectually I like that argument because you could make I think you can make a very sound argument that competition would force people to do better work. Like if you're a plumber, you have a...
This is so fun. I'm showing this to you because, and this is mean. I know. I'm only human though. I'm trying my best. It was a little hard to believe that Dave Rubin, at his caliber of thinking, was getting as much success in this space. So it makes a little sense that a part of that was related to Russian government funding and money. Why is this guy getting the sort of growth that he's getting when he doesn't seem to have spent much time thinking about the most basic thoughts? Like he did try to assert that essentially no regulations would be better because I'm like a libertarian in that way. And it takes a few questions from someone who notably doesn't know that much about politics and gets himself into trouble and has to say he doesn't know much about politics constantly in defense of himself. Just asking a couple simple questions for Rubin to go, no, I mean, I don't actually believe what I just said. I'm just saying as a thought experiment, it would be better if there were no regulations. But wouldn't it not be? Right, it wouldn't be, but it would be hypothetically if you never actually tried it.
a vested interest in doing the best plumbing job you can so that people will rate you on Yelp so that you will get more work. You don't have a vested interest in cutting corners. Now, you might, right? You're going to push it as much as you can to save as much time and energy and money as you can. Mm-hmm. But once you go over that edge, you don't want to be known as the guy that you tightened something too much so that you flooded the house. Or when you're building a house.
You're thinking logically, though. When people fuck things up and short things and do things terrible, they're not thinking logically.
But I don't think it's the government. I don't think it's the government that they're like, the government gave me this regulation, so that's why I'm going to do it right.
Well, if they didn't have any regulations, there'd be no incentive whatsoever to do it right.
No, there would be an incentive.
If they knew there were no inspectors.
Okay. It hurts to listen to this. Yes, some regulations are definitely necessary. A bunch of them are. That's why we've kept them around. When libertarians will make this argument, oh, well, no, people just out of the goodness of their heart or to have a good reputation, they just won't cut corners if you didn't have regulations because they want to have that good reputation. But even with the regulations that we do have already in place, the open windows that are left for people to cut corners, they definitely go through. And that causes problems, and sometimes you have to adjust and increase the regulations. And in countries that don't have what we have in terms of that framework, see more disasters like buildings collapsing because of bad construction. So maybe it makes a little bit more sense as to why Dave Rubin has had the success that he has, some money being funneled his way. Then this is, like I said, sort of loosely connected to this, but you have this story that is so funny. Do you remember that trip that Tucker Carlson took to the grocery store in Russia? Apparently, Tenet Media was weary to post this because it seemed like it would blow their cover. It seemed like it was too overtly pro-Russian for even this organization that was being funded by Russia.
A standing feature of Cold War propaganda in the West was the Soviet grocery store. No products, no choices, shoddily made things. And it wasn't actually propaganda, it was real. And you can look up the pictures on the internet if you want. So we thought it would be interesting to take a look at a contemporary, modern day, 2024 Russian grocery store 2 years into sanctions.
And let me see if I can get to the ending that really triggers me.
Maybe it doesn't matter as much as you thought. Corruption.
Oh, yes, here it is. Okay.
And we didn't pay any attention to costs as we were just putting in the cart what we would actually eat over a week. And we all came in around $400, about $400. It was $104 US here. And that's when you start to realize that ideology maybe doesn't matter as much as you thought. Corruption. If you take people's standard of living and you tank it through filth and crime and inflation, and they literally can't buy the groceries they want, at that point, maybe it matters less what you say or whether you're a good person or a bad person. You're wrecking people's lives in their country, and that's what our leaders have done to us. And coming to a Russian grocery store, the heart of evil, and seeing what things cost and how people live, it will radicalize you against our leaders. That's how I feel anyway, radicalized.
Oh gosh, radicalized. I feel so radicalized. Do you know what he's saying? What a crazy person he is. He's trying to say, all these democratic values and America and liberty and freedom. And they try to act like this authoritarian regime that oppresses people and tries to take over other countries is so bad. But the one grocery store that the Russian government let me go to make this is so nice. Let's throw out all of those principles. It's cheaper here, in part because people make so much less money there. But he's trying to get people to believe in a completely different context. It's so nice because it was $100 USD for his groceries. And that little experiment he did is why we should maybe think about abandoning some of our principles. But if I said that, Tucker Carlson, and I was in a conversation with him, he'd go, what? You're not at all fairly characterizing what I said. That's why he speaks in the weird, vague way that he does. But that's what he was saying. Maybe corruption and, the heart of evil isn't as bad if it's cheap to live there and people are making much, much less there. It's actually more expensive compared to the average wage there to get groceries. And that, according to reporting and according to this indictment, was a little bit too much, even for Tenet Media, but they ultimately posted that. To be clear, this was a little thing Tenet Media posted. Tucker Carlson, I don't think, had a big deal with them like the others did. But while we're on the subject of Tucker Carlson, you have this clip from one of his tours.
I'm encouraged by the joining of Trump's Republican MAGA movement by Robert Kennedy, because I've known Bobby Kennedy for a while, not as long as you, of course, but I believe Bobby Kennedy to be a very decent and beautiful.
So that's Russell Brand. And yes, I only grabbed this clip because I wanted to say, where are your shoes? Why is he always barefoot at these events? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I believe Bobby Kennedy to be a very decent and beautiful and kind man. And I also note that since he has joined the campaign, he is brought to the forefront, and I'm, of course, not claiming to be an expert in your politics, but I noted that he spoke about free speech.
Okay, so anyways, that's that, hyping up Robert F. Kennedy Jr. now that he's endorsed Trump. A lot there for you to respond to. You can do it in the comments, and you can support the show by clicking the join button below.